What's up, guys? Welcome back to the garage. We got the OBS back in here. We're going to work on the rear suspension. We're going to finish up these suspension changes I have on the list. Let's check it out. So this one's kind of going to be a two-part video. The first thing we're going to do is a pretty simple modification. I've always wanted a vehicle that had slapper style traction bars. I just think they look really cool. They're a real nostalgia, real old school style. So I grabbed a set of chrome ones we're going to throw on the back of this thing. It doesn't have the power to really need them right now, but it will in the future, and I think they look cool, so we're going to put them on. And then the other half is going to be this guy here. This is a Airlift air suspension control kit. It's got an onboard air compressor. It's got a gauge that goes on the dash. You can air up and you can let down the pressure in the air shocks that we installed on a previous video. You see, I installed these air shocks on a previous video that I put out a couple of weeks ago, and it's just to help the truck. Like when I do actually have stuff in the bed, I don't want it running on the bump stops the whole time, so I can put a few pounds of pressure into these air shocks and actually use the bed for truck stuff. So it makes it great, but it's manual. You have to carry around an air compressor with you. You have to air it up. It's a bit cumbersome. So we've got this air kit with onboard compressor, and it's going to be push button. It's going to make it so much easier. I'm excited. So the install for these is going to be pretty straightforward, and I'll show you how to orient them once we get under the vehicle. But they clamp to the spring, the leaf spring on either side of the axle. And then they use these U-bolts to clamp to the leaf spring, and then you install the bumpers on the front depending on where it lands on your leaf spring. One tool, 9/16 socket. I'm going to use a small impact to get them started, and then run them down probably with a torque wrench. I need to look at the instructions and see if they have any torque specs. But this one's pretty straightforward, so we're going to knock it out real quick, and then we'll get started on the air system. All right, underneath the old truck here, these mount right here on this spring. Over here, I basically split like that. Tighten them up, make sure they're straight, and then as you apply torque to this rear end on acceleration, this spring will twist, and that's what we're trying to stop. So that end will move up, and that rubber bumper on the end will impact the spring and stop the twist of the rear end while still allowing full up and down travel for your suspension. It looks like they're going to fit. I was a little concerned with this drop kit. It's got a pretty large base plate on it, but I'm going to get them loosely mounted up, and then we'll check out the fit, and then we'll finish it up. Alright, got the first one just loosely mounted up here. It probably would have been easier to take the tire off because it's kind of hard to get to those bolts in the back there, but I made it happen. Got it pretty much centered front to back under the axle, and then got it centered this way between the bolts. I don't know if you can really tell. I'm going to snug it down, put the bumper on the end, and then replicate that on the other side, and this one will be done. Quick and easy. Alright, all buttoned up, tightened up, got the bumper lined up there where it'll hit the flat part of the spring. Other side is the same. Tried to match front to back. Make sure the bumper lands in the same spot on the spring. Everything's looking good. I think we can call this one done. Time to move on to the air system. All right, a little rundown on what all comes with this Airlift kit. You get the air compressor, of course. You get a length of black and red wire, a length of fused hot wire. This is a T-fitting to split the wire or the air hose between the compressor, the gauge, and the already installed air shocks. Got a variety of electrical connectors. You got some spade connectors. You got a T-tap. You've got some crimps. These are different options for connecting to a pre-existing fuse in the fuse panel. So that it's kind of like a add a fuse. You've got the gauge itself that gets mounted inside the cab. You got the length of air hose, and this is supposed to connect to the already installed air system on the truck. Now that's everything that comes with this kit. I went and got just this cheap installation kit for the air shocks that are currently on the truck, specifically for one part. I wanted the air chuck part, the part where you actually input air into the system, because this system takes that out of the equation. It connects to the T that splits the air between the two air shocks, but you lose the manual fill option. You lose this guy. And I don't want to lose this just in case something happens to this air system and I still need to put air in the shocks for whatever reason. So this little $18 kit gives me one of these guys. I'll take it out so you can see it. Hang on. This guy here. And that's what connects to this copper fitting. And that will connect to the air hose that's already under the vehicle. And there's a T in here as well. So this line goes to this connects to this T, and this T goes to the old fill and to the air system. So it's going to be a lot more connections, smaller risk of leaks, but I think it's worth it to have the manual fill option as well as the system. So that's the plan. Got to figure out somewhere to mount this guy up. They want it like inside the frame rail or somewhere out of the weather, out of the elements. So I get that mounted up and then start running wires. I've got to figure out how to get this wire into the cab. I was able to do so for the backup camera, so I may use the same grommet I punched out for that. But I have to run it under the carpet because it's towards the back. So we'll see. We'll figure something out. All right, let's check it out. All right, picking back up on this air compressor install. Trying to brainstorm and figure out where to put this gauge. Got to be mindful though because of future plans for the truck. I don't want it down here banging my legs on it. Although it wouldn't be too bad in the way. Got to be mindful of what I punch holes in. It would go perfect right there, but then you wouldn't be able to use the emergency brake. So that sucks. So my plan, I think, is to use the screws that hold this ashtray thing in and use one side in the hole that's already there and re-drill the other side to fit these bolts. So I don't have to punch any new holes in the truck, and it's far enough over to be out of the way because I plan on replacing this center console with one of the ones that goes all the way up and has the sub in the back. So I can't put it here in the middle because then the console would hit it. So it's got to be over this way. And there I can still use the cigarette lighter or the ashtray thing because that's where my USBs are for my radio. So I think under there is going to work. And then next is going to be mounting the actual compressor. It's not that big, but the hose that comes with it is not very rigid, so you got to be careful. I wanted to put it inside, like maybe behind the seat or something, but getting that hose down and having to drill through the floorboard, not kosher. I will have to figure out how to get the hose up to the dash though, because I think I'm going to put it on the inside of the frame rail right here. It's going to be close to the exhaust, but I think it'll be far enough away that it won't bake. And that exhaust will be moving eventually anyway. It'll just be a single pipe and the muffler will be further back. So I'm going to try that, see how that looks. I may have to put it inside the cab. I don't know why you can't put it inside the engine. are in the engine bay. They say to keep it away from the elements, but they also say to keep it away from heat. So I guess the engine bay is too warm. So I'm just going to keep brainstorming and try to figure it out. On their instructions, it says for this model truck, in the frame rail there is probably your best bet. I wanted to put it on the driver's side to make the hoses and piping and electrical and everything a lot shorter, but the fuel lines are in the way, the brake lines are in the way, and the emergency brake cable is in the way. So I can't put it on the driver's side. So, all right, I'll figure it out. All right, 3 3/8 is our measurement for the bolts on the ashtray door. So that's from here to this little line here. It's kind of hard to see. I'm going to go ahead and drill it. I'm a little concerned about getting the bolt in from the back side because the gauge is in the way. But hopefully it'll go through and we'll be all right. I may have to drill this one over a little and move this one over a little, but this is all stuff you won't be able to see when I'm done. So if I have to drill multiple holes, it's not that big of a deal. All right, I'm going to punch this hole real quick, and then we'll check it out. All right, that worked out really well. I did have to source some new screws because the original ones weren't long enough, but I never throw anything away, including random screws, so I had some in a box. So that works. It's rigid, it's solid. This still works. I like it. I'm probably going to have to take it back off to hook everything up, but at least I know where it's going in the final. So one step down. All right, next I'm going to work on getting the wiring to that panel and to where the pump's going to go completed. So you go from your fuse box with this fused wire they supply, and that goes straight to the switch on the panel. And then the out of that switch is the rest of this hot wire that connects to the pump, and the pump already has a connector on it. So that's pretty straightforward. There's some terminals on the back of the gauge. I'm assuming it's like a backlight, but I don't know. I'm wondering if I can run one from this output of this switch back to that. So when I push the button, the gauge lights up. I'd have to ground it, but I'm wondering if that'll work. Oh no. We'll figure it out. All right, so we got the wire run into the fuse panel here. And I had this add a fuse that I used when I installed the driver's seat that's power. So I jumped it off of that because that's an unused. It's the circuit for four-wheel drive, and this is not a four-wheel drive truck, so that circuit is unused by anything else, so it's not going to be overloaded by something else, the radio or whatever. So I got it connected there. You can't really see it because it's way up in there, but it is connected. Run down to here. So I'm going to wire this over there to where it's supposed to go on the cigarette ashtray. Cut it off, put the terminal on it, and we'll be able to get the gauge remounted. That is a light on the back of the gauge, so I'm going to try to make that work when I push the button. I need to see about grounding it somewhere, but other than that, it should be pretty straightforward. Alright, so here's my take on this. I had two options. I could put the jumper wire on the inbound side to where the gauge is illuminated anytime the key is on, or I could put it on the outbound side to where it illuminates when I push the button. I decided to go with the inbound side because I want to be able to easily just look and make sure I have proper pressure as I'm driving around town, just in case there's a leak or something like that. So I went on the inbound side. It's kind of twisted up there so you can't see, but the inbound wire comes in to the top of the switch and then jumps over to the gauge, and then the outbound wire is the bottom switch going to this spool. So we're going to start wiring that and feeding it all the way through the dash to that side of the truck, and then we've got to figure out how to get it out of the cab and do the same with the air hose. And we've also got to run some type of a ground from the other spade on the gauge right there. And we got to ground that so that the light turns on. But we're making progress. So far, so good. All right, so the truck exploded. Yeah, no, I just dismantled some things to make it easier to run this wire. So it's got to come from down there where that panel is going to be up through the dash. So I went ahead and pulled the head unit and the liner for the glove box here. And then we're going to run down the A-pillar here underneath the trim along the bottom. And I think what I'm going to do is just drill a hole right here in this slanted part. And I've got some rubber grommets I can put in there, and then just punch the hose and the wire out through there, because the pump's going to be on the frame rail right here, so it'll be pretty close. You just have to hop it over and plug it in. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take my time and pull this wire and this hose, because if you knock anything loose in there, then stuff doesn't work anymore. So you got to be careful. All right, I'm gonna get started. Making good progress here. We got the hot wire ran all the way down. Got the hole drilled for the grommet. This is the biggest drill bit I could find. That guy there. Got the hose, the air hose run back the other way. So I'm gonna start snaking it back up through the dash to over there. That'll be a little more difficult, I think, because this is not very, it's pretty rigid. I don't want it to kink. So we'll see how that goes. And then once we get that run, get everything snugged up, then we can start putting the trim pieces back together and unexplode the truck. And then we'll mount the pump. It comes with 4 self-tappers. Run the wires, connect the air hose. We'll be done. Getting closer. Getting closer. All right, guys, we're making good progress. I got the air hose ran over here. I got everything connected. I got the gauge mounted up. And let me tell you, I love it when things just fall together in an elegant way. There's a screw right there that's a ground. So I just had a little bitty tiny ground wire right to that screw, and now the gauge lights up when you turn on the key. I love it. I love it. All right, so I'm going to finish up this side. Everything there should be done. I need to button up a couple of items over here, and then I can start putting that side back together. And then we'll work under the truck. I want to put everything back together so it's not so overwhelming when I'm done. So I'm going to work on that for now, give myself a break, and then we'll do the compressor. All right, we got the cab buttoned back up, got the wires run under the trim, got the seat belt reinstalled. Everything over here is good. I've been working on underneath, and I think I've got it done. I'm gonna grab a light so you guys can see, and then we'll go check out what I've done underneath, and then we can knock this one off the list. It was never on the list, but we can knock it off anyway. All right, so I got the compressor mounted to the frame rail here. I was only able to get 2 of the big bolts in it, but I think that's plenty. I had to get creative with some extensions to get that one there. But I also run the ground to one of those bolts, so I don't have to run a separate ground. And I connected the hot wire to the one we ran, and all of the electrical is done. And then it's back here to the air side. So this kit is designed to connect to the original feed line of the kit, but I wanted to keep that as a manual feed. So I teed into the system on this side. You can see the T tucked in up there. So I teed into the hose that's going to this shock to feed this system. And then coming out from that, it goes to another of the standard fillers, and then the line for this kit connects to that. And you've got this kit's T-fitting there. One of those, so there's 3 outputs, or 1 input, 2 outputs. So 1 input from the pump itself, and then 1 output goes to the shocks, and 1 output goes back to the dash to show you your gauge pressure and for your release button. So that's pretty much going to wrap it up under here. All the wires are cinched up. Got some zip ties on stuff. I do need to trim this zip tie eventually, but I'm going to get out from underneath here and get cleaned up, and then we'll check out the system and how it works. Alright, so there's no pressure in the system because I had to cut the line to splice in. So I'm going to turn the key on here, and that'll activate the system. The light on the gauge turns on, and then you just hit up on this. Pretty straightforward, up to 40 psi that quick. And then to go back down, because I like to run it at the minimum pressure so I get a smoother ride. So you hit this bleed button until you're back down to your 20, 25 pounds, wherever you want to run it at. The minimum suggested is 20 psi, so we'll leave it a little over 20. Yeah, everything's working great. I am super excited about having that one done. I was a bit, it was a bit daunting, you know, with all the wires and air hoses and everything, but it ended up being easier than I thought it would be. So I'm glad it's done. All right, guys, that's going to finish this one up. That was a pretty big project that I'm glad to get off the list. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me out here in the garage, helping me out. It went a lot smoother than I thought it would be. I'm happy with it. I'm very happy with it. If you like this content, guys, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. I've got some more stuff coming up. This is going to finish up the suspension changes on the truck. Next is going to be either the interior sound system, or we're going to start on the motor. We got some big plans for the motor: full top end, full exhaust, spark, fuel, the whole 9 yards. It's going to be a big project. It's also starting to warm up here in Texas, so we've got some work we need to do on the old vet. The factory cooling system is just not going to work for Southeast Texas and air conditioning and the heat and traffic. So we're going to look into revamping the cooling system with new radiator, new fans, and all the works. So that's going to be a project that's coming up, so be sure to stay tuned for that. I'm going to finish it off here. You guys have a good one and rock on.